Can you see the slides? Yes, all good. Okay, great. I'm just going to move you all to the top of my screen so that you're not like, yeah, there we go. So Davos is happening right now. So I just thought I'd just like acknowledge that. And this was the report from the World Economic Forum that was produced to be sent to Davos. And the headline of the report on one of the websites that we were looking at that Simon actually discovered states this: economic and political polarization will intensify as collaboration is needed more than ever to respond to severe threats to climate, public health, and technology systems. And it just feels like we're at the beginning of a new decade, and it's time to kind of do things differently, but also the kind of work that we're up to is just needed more than ever before. So I think it's exciting. It's exciting for us, and there's also a little bit of pressure, right? I don't know if you all feeling that a little bit, maybe. So yeah, that's what's going on right now. Just a little bit of background and framing. So generally, multi-stakeholder collaboration can come about driven by 3 different purposes. One can be like it's a problem-focused approach. So how, what can we do together to solve this problem? Or it can be an opportunity-focused. So let's join forces and create more value or innovate or create something different. Or it can be conflict-focused, as in finally let's sit down and find a way forward. And I think in our work, we find that all 3 of these things come together, and that actually multi-stakeholder collaboration addresses all 3. And so when we go into it, we need to be aware, like, oh, how do we work with all 3 of these things as they come up? And then we've defined what we think multi-stakeholder collaboration includes and involves. And I wonder, Rifdan, would you like to read the definition that we have here of multi-stakeholder collaboration for everyone?
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
I'll read it. Okay. Multi-stakeholder collaboration is a process of interactive learning, empowerment, and participatory governance that enables change makers with interconnected sustainability problems and ambitions, but often differing interests, to be collectively innovative and resilient when faced with the emerging risks, crises, and opportunities of a complex and changing environment.
Yeah, so when we try to address sustainability problems or ecosystem problems, thank you, Rifdan, it is inherently a complex, changing environment. First of all, it's just an ecosystem, so it's just changing all the time. And then there's all the people that influence that ecosystem too. And I think sometimes we just forget that, or it's convenient to say that's just not, we don't have to grapple with it, right? And so one of the things that we're really promoting here is like, well, we need to collaborate together to be able to understand the complexity as far as we can, and then to collectively be able to innovate and shift the system. Of course, this workshop is focused on the facilitation of this, and it's really kind of essential to multi-stakeholder collaboration. So we can't really change anything if we don't collaborate, basically. We can change ourselves, but we can't change a system, and we certainly can't change the direction of something unless we work together. And facilitation is the oil that lubricates collaboration. So I'm sure, well, here's just a kind of what a facilitator looks like. Can be a convener, brings people together, can be a catalyst, can also be a moderator, can be all 3 of those things at the same time. And I'm sure some of you have been in meetings like this. Hands up if you've been in a meeting like that. Right? So this doesn't bring about collaboration. This just brings about, like, I'm not going back to the next meeting kind of result. So this is why facilitation is so important. because well-facilitated meetings have moments like this. Like people are dynamic, they're engaged, they've got things to say, they're drawing, they're smiling, all those kind of things. So this is what we're after, right, in our work, or in the people that we work with, to help us to create this kind of collaborative process. So I mentioned this before, we have identified, and there may be more, but for now we've identified these dialogue principles as key for collaboration. Shared expectations, working with power, communicating effectively, fostering learning, and moving through conflict. And as I mentioned, the last workshop, we focused on working with power. And this workshop, we're going to focus on shared expectations. And then we'll run 3 more during this season on the other 3, and do deep dives into the other 3 as well. So shared expectations, here's basically what I think that shared expectations include. The first thing is, what am I invited to be a part of? So before you even get anybody into a co-creative process or a collaborative process, or into a room or onto a webinar, there's a whole like, well, what is the invite? What's the offer? Right? What am I being invited to? And then there's creating a shared vision about, why are we working together and how are we working together? And then there's the how will we know if we're successful? So we call those shared measurements. And then there's a whole level of leadership around that, which is embody, like the facilitator needs to embody a lot of the how we work together, the why we work together, as do the people who are kind of leading the dialogue, or who might have greater stakes in the collaboration. So you don't, for example, in some of the work that we do with government, your facilitator might show up already and ready to embody it, but then your key ministry people might not be at all ready to say the right things in the room. So there's an element of like, who's got power and how does that leadership show up in a way that is supportive of what we're wanting, so the modeling of that. So I'm going to go through these kind of 4 key pieces. Here's an example of what am I invited to be a part of, and it's a process map, and it's not the most inspiring thing. So this isn't the only thing that you want to have to say this is what you're being invited to be part of, but you don't want to not have this. It's the idea that like the process of collaboration that you're inviting someone into is possible to put on a slide, right? It doesn't have to be this detailed, but at least to say, this is the kind of thing that we're going to do. It might involve face-to-face, or this many workshops and sessions. You can join the first one and then you can leave, or you can stay, like just some kind of parameters about what's the invitation. It's like if you're invited to a party, but nobody told you what to bring or what to wear, then you would be a bit like uncomfortable about going to the party. So that's a kind of the basic level about what that person's being invited into. And then there's the whole like, well, this is another version of this that we have, for our national commodity platforms. So it doesn't, this is more detailed. This is like actually what they used in Paraguay to do collaboration around soy, which was great. So it's more detailed for their stakeholders. This is something that we've put together, which could be globally, this is global, that could be adapted depending on the country, the number of people, but like some kind of key things that might happen in a process in terms of our guidelines. And that's great. And then there's the, well, what might it feel like to join? What might that actually feel like? And so give me a moment just to switch technology here, because I want to show you a video about what it might feel like. And Simon, can you just give me a little bit of a, okay, tell me first of all if you can hear it. Can you hear anything?
No, not yet.
Okay, so remind me, someone, how I do that on Zoom.
When you share your screen, the box comes up of what you're sharing. At the bottom of that, a couple of little boxes you should tick.
Share computer sound, that's right.
Yeah,
got it.
it.
Thank you so much. Okay. Share. second. Now?
Yeah, it's fine, we can hear it.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
So just take a moment and notice how that made you feel. And then part of the reason that I show you that is because it feels different to this. Can you see the slide? Yes?
No, you need to stop sharing and then reshare again.
I have to stop sharing and reshare again.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try that. No. I cannot access now my stop sharing thing. You know what I mean?
Try pressing escape.
Escape. I'm meant to be the Zoom master, but clearly today I am not the Zoom master. Okay, I can see all of you. What can you see? Can you still see the YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna do it myself.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Oh, there we are.
Woohoo! Okay. That's the problem of having multiple screens open at the same time. Okay, so let me go back. So you can see the slide again?
Yeah.
Great. So just to say that like, what am I being invited to be a part of has a kind of technical element to it, a process element to it, and it also has a feeling to it. Like, what does it feel like when someone invites me to be part of this? And I'm not suggesting that we all have to be as inspiring as Martin Luther King, but we could try, right? It's a good kind of benchmark to go with. And I think a lot of these kind of collaborative efforts start with very informal conversations. And so how we show up in those conversations, and how, whether you are the facilitator yourself or whether you're contracting a facilitator to support your work, it's like, how do you, as the, let's say, the leader in charge or the project manager of this project, or with your facilitator, how do you show up in a way that's going to inspire people to join you? So that's just as important as having your slide, in the sense that this is what you're being invited to be part of. So we're going to break you up into paired conversations, and Matthias is going to put you into rooms, and you'll be with one other person. Matthias, are we odd numbers or are we even numbers?
We are odd.
Okay, so leave me out, or leave yourself out of the conversation. Is that good?
Yeah.
Or yeah. So just like in terms of your own expectations, what expectations are you in around, just to give yourself some reflection time in a paired conversation, do you have from your collaborative or collaboration projects. And just to give you time to like really think, oh, do I have shared expectations? Do I have my own? What are they like? And we'll give you a couple of minutes each to have that conversation. And you'll see a little screen pop up, like a pop-up box on your screen, and then you'll be invited to join a breakout room. So just click yes, and then you'll find your partner to have that conversation. Okay, any questions about the technology, the process? Okay.
Just 1 second.
Thanks, Matthias.
Okay, you are being invited to join a group. Please click accept.
I'm not receiving anything yet. Okay, now.
Okay. Yeah, there we are.
Javier. Javier, ¿estás ahí?
Hola Matías, me conecté, no sé qué pasó.
Ok, te mando a un grupo de nuevo. Segundito.
Estaba con Sandra.
Con Sandra. Ay, no sé qué pasó, disculpa. Te mando con Sandra y Lucía. Ahí,
Vale.
dale a aceptar.
Great, we're back. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're going to take a couple of minutes and just see like what came up. Is there anything that anyone wants to share based on your conversations? We probably have time for like 3 or 4 people. Malika.
Oh, okay. I'll volunteer. So I was with the wonderful Leaf. So he is going to Peru soon. So we were talking about shared expectations of bringing about a feeling of respect in a very highly conflictual situation. So be able to really listen to each other's concerns, respecting, and how do you manage that conflict resolution with with still building the trust, because it's a very new process there. And then I was talking about my workshops in Brazil and Paraguay, but I'll just talk about one where I guess my shared expectation is how do you really create a atmosphere of trust so that people are able to say their truth without feeling that they have to always sell their theory of change or sell that everything is working out. So how do you create that space so that we are able to say what is working, what's not working, and really learn together? Thank you.
Great. And did you have any ideas about how to do that?
We didn't have enough time.
Okay, great. Well, later. Okay, great. Anyone else?
I was with Jonas, and we talked about how ILC's got 20 plus different multi-stakeholder collaborations going, and how people get angry and fight in them, and how that's actually a good thing, because that's causing them to start trusting each other, causing them to get themselves into the room. And we had a quick chat about the stages of grief, that people go through when they're grieving, and just the headlines of denial, anger, and acceptance are the main 3 stages. And when people get angry, that means they're halfway to acceptance. So the acceptance that the group is one that they should be part of. So maybe we should be less worried about keeping things smooth, keeping things happy, and that anger, that conflict is part of the group forming.
Yeah, great. Yeah, moving through conflict is purposefully written to move through it, not to avoid it.
Yeah,
because it can be very generative, right? In the end.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, the human thing is, oh my God, they're getting angry. What do I do? But actually, if you welcome that and let it happen, then it can be a good thing.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Simon and Jonas. One more pair. No? Okay. All right, let me just bring the slides back up. So the other big piece was the shared vision. And this could be a number of things. It's like a compelling image of the future. You could define it like that. You could define it as an imagination stretching yet still credible view of what's possible. And, kind of like we just heard from Martin Luther King, a dream that really engages the heart and spirit and inspires people to take action. And that really, this is essential to be in the long game. And when we're talking about sustainability and systems change, we need to be in it for the long game. So here's some of the shared vision kind of descriptions that we liked and wanted to share with you. I think some of the initial problems that we see that means a shared vision is super important is, well, you just mentioned it, like this lack of trust between key actors, that they really have a different interest. And it's not like it's with a bad intention. They just come from a completely different worlds often, and they don't even understand the other people's world in the room. So they just have completely different interests, agendas, and they live in like a different soup, if you want. So there's a whole load of work to be done around the fact that there is no common vision. There can be a lack of shared understanding on the issues, or just Just people have very different understandings. Often the business case for engagement is not adequately developed, so you don't get such a good buy-in to the process. Often we focus a lot on negatives rather than language of opportunities. We just mentioned we try to avoid conflicts, so when there are sensitive issues, we deny them or we avoid them. Also we find that sometimes we have weak representation, so there's unbalanced groups or key decision makers can be absent. And we also think sometimes there's unclear roles for government and private sector on how to actually participate. So one of the things that we're working with and is a ladder, what we call a ladder of change. So this is a ladder of change. And you'll see here that I've highlighted here 3 of the criteria that we've identified. One is attitudes to dialogue, another one is sensitive issues, and the other one is alignment. And if you see the incremental change, we've tried to identify here kind of what might you expect to shift through the process of collaboration, and that these should be considered successes along the way. And that I think we have a tendency in our world, but until we've had impact and saved this much hectares of forest, we are a failure. And what we're saying is, oh, well, no, actually once you've, let's say you've got to a point where you've moved on sensitive issues to, oh, most significant sensitive issues are actually raised for discussion, that should be seen as a great success amongst the people who are collaborating. And here you might have dialogue, the attitudes change in the room. So if you look at where I'm putting my pointer, that, you know, dialogue suddenly is characterized by active listening and mindful speaking and an openness to other opinions, but that it takes time to get there. And that in this time, you are defining your shared vision. It's not like you will arrive at the first meeting and go, great, we have a shared vision, let's go. There's all this process is happening or as you define the shared vision as well. So this is kind of the why we think it's essential. You know, once you have it, it really acts as like a rudder or a compass to keep people engaged and focus on that bigger vision. So it's like, I have my interests, we have our conflict, I see things differently, but I still buy into and really am passionate about, my heart still cares about this big shared common vision. And so it's a really good thing to have under your belt in a collaborative process to keep coming back to keep the momentum going and to keep people inspired and engaged. And what we say here, it ideally looks like, is that all participants like own and promote it as a vision for change, and that includes a common understanding of the opportunities and the problems. And that this vision actually transfers to new members or participants in the collaboration. So you might have a change in leadership in a company, or you might have a change of actual government, like a new government's elected, and that it's a strong enough common vision that it gets kind of easily transferred to people who come in later into the process. So just an example of, now I'm going to be good with the technology. Of a recent shared vision. Does anybody know what I'm about to show based on the picture that you just saw? No? I'm going to share my screen again. So it's just to show, like, this is what it could feel like when you have a shared vision, when you've reached a shared vision.
Je n'entends pas d'objection. L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
How do you feel when you see that? Do you want to share? I mean, I feel all like goosebumpy and like kind of like I want to cry, and I like, look how many people are smiling. So does anyone else have anything they want to share?
I mean, hello?
Yeah,
Yes,
Alex and then Lucia. Yeah. Alex, you want to go?
Okay.
Yeah.
So just like people look as well very relieved. Like they look not only happy, but very relieved.
Yeah. Lucia?
Yeah, what I feel is this common joy of accomplish something together, and we have to celebrate in a very joyful and achieve a goal.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, Malika, you want to share?
Oh, I said it's so nice to see policymakers showing their hearts, because often when you see them in conferences, look so boring, look so, like their facial expression is so different. So seeing them themselves, seeing them who they are and fully heart engaged is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I really noticed like the need to hug, to hold hands, to a few tears. Everyone looking at that, the connectivity felt really strong in the room as well. Yeah. So just like keep that in your imagination, like at what point might, the moment that a shared vision and a collaborative process is agreed feel like that, because that's kind of what we're aiming for. So I wanted to share that with you, and I'm going to go back to my slides. Okay. So one of the things just that I love about Cristina Figueres, who facilitated, she was the woman at the front who hugged the woman next to her. Costa Rican lady who facilitated the Paris Agreement. And, she really credits like meditation as one of the things that got her through her work. So it's just also like, what are we all practicing as practitioners and individuals to be able to lead these kind of efforts, because they are challenging. So we don't want to pretend that they're not. Okay, so beyond the shared vision, there's a kind of thing about like the timing and where we are in the process. And this is important just for people to be like, how long do I have to be part of this? I need to ask my boss for permission. I need a budget. There's all sorts of kind of realities around that. We just want to say that when you start, there isn't a shared vision, and that can be sometimes quite a challenge to sell to people. It's like, will you come and join us in this collaborative effort and create the vision? So we can't give you the specific goals right now and the specific outcomes that you're going to have or can expect. And so inside of that, we look at focusing on like connecting. So like creating the group, defining the issue, building a shared language, and then emphasizing the common ground and rather than the differences, while also bringing an appreciative approach to different perspectives. And that we also dig deeper into the divergence rather than avoid it, which would be our human tendency to avoid it. And then some of the, I talked about the why of the shared vision, but there's also the how are we going to work together? And this is as important as the why. So the best practices that we've kind of picked from some of the literature and experience. So seeking like maximum engagement. So finding ways that really engage people in the topic and the conversation. And that can be, using Zoom instead of having no video and being on a WhatsApp call, for example, or it could be just the way that you engage people, the storytelling, the invitation to comment, the having online collaborative spaces, prototyping, etc., etc. That you're trying to empower all voices in the dialogue. So there'll be some that are already fully empowered and you don't need to do anything, and it's being able to identify the ones that you need to lift up and bring more into the room because they would naturally either be really quiet. Other ones, like we just saw these policymakers coming and talking to us from their heart, really that we need to engage the heart. And that is what creates longevity, care, passion, and also more shared understanding and compassion for other people. If it can be a lighthouse of hope and inspiration, then that's awesome. Like if every time someone participated in your collaborative effort, they left feeling inspired and looking forward to the next time, that's a big win, right? That's a really big win. It's almost like a breath of fresh air for that person, potentially, in all the other things that they do in a week. So if you can think of it like that, and really bring that to them, it makes a big difference. We talked about focusing on alignment. And then here's a good one: avoid the rabbit hole of wordsmithing. So one of the things that we who are, involved in policy shifts and reform and technical kind of capacity building, words are important for sure. But when we're building a shared vision amongst many, many different stakeholders, we don't want to get trapped into the wordsmithing. So we want to focus a little more on like, what might it feel like? What might it look like? What's in the picture? What's out of the picture? So if we use different kinds of questions and framings and approaches in terms of the way we design the collaborative effort, you could use illustration, you could use imaging, you could use feelings, you could use like a visual representation of it. There's lots of ways to do that, rather than getting into I think it should be this word, and then you've got like a document with 300 track changes, and nobody wants to come to the next meeting, which is potentially what happens. So I'm just going to check time to see if I think we have time. Great. So I'm going to, it's an invitation to have a visioning process for yourself. And it's really to share a particular technique that you could use in a room with people. I'm not going to do it related to your work. I'm going to do it for you personally. You can keep your video on or turn your video off, but I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. So whatever you feel more comfortable with, video on or off, is up to you. And I'm just going to talk you through a visioning process. And then if you have something to write with ready after you finish, so that anything that comes up you can capture on a piece of paper or on your computer, whatever works best for you. So take a moment, sit back in your chair, shut your eyes, and take a few deep breaths. And then if you can feel your feet on the floor and your weight on the chair. And then just like relax your shoulders. Good, and I'm just going to ask you a few questions and just let whatever comes into your imagination or your vision or your mind, just let it come. So when you look back to when you were young, what were you most passionate about? When you look back to when you were young, what were you most passionate about? And when you recall your interests and your passions, what stayed with you over the years? What keeps coming back to you? When you recall your interests and your passions, what stayed with you over the years? What keeps coming back to you? And at this particular moment in the history of the planet, in the history of the human species, what do you care most deeply about in your work? At this moment in the history of the planet and the history of the human species, what do you care most deeply about in your work? And if you feel into your heart right now, what does your heart feel most drawn to work on? If you feel into your heart right now, what does your heart feel most drawn to work on? And if you feel deep inside of yourself, what do you know deep inside that you're really good at? Feeling deep inside yourself, what do you know deep inside you are really good at? Okay, so in a few moments, but not right now, we're going to you can open your eyes, and then when you do, you can just take a few minutes and just capture any key insights, images, things that came up, and you can write them down. So you can open your eyes. And I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. All right, so just finish up with that. And for those of you who chose to turn your video off, if you feel like turning it back on, love to see you again. Does anyone want to like share how was that for you? Time to hear from 2 people, maybe a couple of people. Someone who hasn't shared yet. Yeah, Lisa.
Just to make sure, so you want me to share like what went into my mind?
It could be, or just how was it as a process? Either one is fine.
It was a very good, profound process. Actually, I thought also the like what came first and then afterwards, it made a lot of sense. And also, well, in my case, I can share a little bit. I thought that as a young person, I've always been very connected with nature and sharing with people and stories. And also in my work today, like what I'm really passionate about working with or telling stories about is nature, trees, animals, and what I'm really good at is connecting with people I meet and also sharing that connection or their stories with others. Yeah, more or less.
Great, so a lot of nice alignment.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, I find like that exercise I think took 8 minutes, including the reflection time. So just the level of profoundness that we are as humans able to access very quickly if we're given the opportunity is amazing, right? So to be able to do that, you can do that in a room with 40 people or bigger as well. One more person that hasn't shared yet, if you want to share. So it's always like, so in my mind, I'm thinking, how long should I wait as the facilitator? How long should I wait for someone to come forward before I move on? No? Okay. Well, thank you for participating in that. I'm going to share my slides again with you. And I'm going to move into the shared measurements. So how will we know when we're successful? And I'm not going to go into a huge amount of depth here, but if you think about the Paris Agreement, I think it was like 220 different commitments, and then all different in different countries. So the shared measurements in that context are super complex. So they can be that complex, of course. There's also the shared measurements of how does it feel along the way. So I showed you that ladder of change. There's the like shared measurements potentially of the outcome and the vision, but there's also the shared measurements of how we're going to move through this collaborative process. And these questions are a mix on both of those levels. So some of the questions that we might ask ourselves if we're in a collaborative process and that a facilitator might bring is, well, what will we feel? So how will it, when we're successful, what will we feel? What actions will we take regularly that we potentially weren't taking before? So what will have changed in that respect? And sometimes it might be the same thing, so it doesn't have to be that they're changed. What will people say about us? And how will people's assessment of us changed? So how will their assessments of us changed? And that can be from an individual. So if you have a company participating, the assessment of that, the way that company might be assessed through participating would be different than the government's assessment of participating. And then what will we have accomplished to make this happen? So if this is our shared vision, what will we have accomplished to make the vision happen? It's one of the kind of along the way milestones, if you want. I just gave you an example. For those of you on the call, Simon and a few people talked about the acronym MSC FSC, and I'm not sure that all of you know what that means, but we use that to say multi-stakeholder collaboration for systems change. And at the moment, I'm leading a kind of co-creation team to look at how we invite different organizations across the world into shaping that for the future and bringing it to our work. And so we've identified for ourselves some shared measurements for our work. And so this is just an example of what we have. And this is for us by the end of 2020 along the way. So, Sandra, would you like to read out the first two?
Yes. We have a powerful and simple story of change that inspires people by April. Our community's experience as visionary, grounded, collaborative, candid, inclusive, patient, and loving by July.
By July, exactly. So I noticed we have actually put timelines in here, so this is important as well. Life, would you like to read out the next one?
Individuals in our community have stronger, trusting, deeper relationships with each other and are in personal and group practices to embody our collective vision by September. Next one.
So this is, yeah, great, carry on.
People talk about the amazing work that we're doing on transformational systemic change and how to make it happen in practice by November. Nice.
Yep.
The last?
Yep.
All right. We have enabled something in the real world that is undeniably transformative, a real sense of wow with quality and depth by December.
Yeah. Thank you. And the reason that I share these is because they're not your kind of standard project outcomes that you might see in a kind of standard project proposal. And I just wanted to give you a flavor of what they also might look like for a group of people in a collaborative process, right? That it's a slightly different tone, different seeking. And then I talked about leadership. And I mean, when I was making this slide, I was like, this is such a giant topic. And I know that we're not going to have time to delve into it because leadership is just so key for all of this. But let's just first of all say that we all have the capacity for leadership and we all lead our own lives in any way and shape and form anyway. So I just, from my work, I teach embodied leadership in another part of my life. And here's some of the things that we say is kind of key, which is one is like pragmatic wisdom. So we don't want to be like wise and fluffy in the clouds, but we want to be wise and like, and how do you take action? How do you take skillful action from that place? And then grounded compassion, skillful action, and inspiring and trustworthy. And I think one of the key things over here is like, a true leader really lives what they say, they model what they preach, and they embody something that people will go, I want to be part of that. I'm not quite sure why, but I want to be. And that your actions consistently reflect your values and your commitment, especially under pressure. So in this kind of work that we're doing, especially as facilitators as well, or as leaders of projects around collaboration, there is a lot of pressure often from multiple stakeholders to do different things, and conflict and timelines and all that kind of stuff. And so the question is, if we say we want to work like this, or we have ways of working that we want to be in, like showing up with our hearts, or being able to say our truths in a safe space, or being able to face conflict, and I'm including all of us because you're all on this webinar that makes you all leaders of this kind of work, need to be able to reflect and model that even when we're under pressure. And that takes practice and learning and certain kind of attention, I think, from all of us. So I'll leave you that, like, that's a taster if you want. And there's a lot more that we need to do, and I hope we will be doing through this community around leadership for systems change. So it's in the pipeline as well. And I wanted to give you as much time as possible to take your questions, and then if we have time, we can do we'll do a round of what did you learn, if anything, from this call. So does anyone have questions? Sandra?
Please. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. As always, that you share your wisdom, many things to think about it. In your experience, there is I don't know, step-by-step process that you would, suggest to build a shared vision, or is more, this combination of principles and concepts and skills?
I mean, yes, I think there could be a step-by-step process. I think in the National Commodity Platform methodology, the step-by-step process is probably too focused on outcomes rather than the principles of the step-by-step process. So I wanted to focus more on the principles of it in this particular training because we're focusing on the facilitation of it. Rather than the management, if you want, of the project or the program. But I think it starts by, there's a kind of at some point there's a group that comes together and has a conversation, and then the group gets wider and has another conversation, and then the group gets wider again, and eventually they say, this is what we're inviting you into. And eventually that gets written down as well. And it goes on a website, right? And then it has a life, then it takes on a life, basically, of its own. But I think step by step, it's really that. There's a small group, the group gets bigger, the vision changes in iterations as that happens. And then eventually there's some point where it gets put into some kind of PDF that has a picture, and it suddenly becomes official. Do you know what I mean? I'm interested if other people have other ideas in response to your question.
Thanks, Sandra, for that question, because actually it's one of the shared vision was a question I wanted to ask about all of you. In systems practice, you usually say it's better to have a shared understanding of the system rather than a shared vision. Because at least you can agree how the system works because everyone might have a subtlety in how they see their shared vision. And one of the language that I like in system thinking, it says rather than a vision, they use a guiding star. Like how the angels use the northern lights as the guiding star. Well, let's just have a guiding, because often we get too caught up in the specificities of the visions, and that might, I wonder whether in multi-stakeholder collaboration that might hamper rather than, unless, especially when people have very divergent interest, whether focusing on really getting out a shared vision hampers the process rather than facilitates the process. So that was more of a question rather than a answer to Sandra.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think there's probably advantages and disadvantages. So if you, I like the idea of having a guiding star, or like your North Pole or whatever, whatever language is good in that respect. And in my experience, having something that's broad enough for all the divergent views to kind of subscribe to can be super helpful, like a year down the road when people are like, you know, and you're like, yeah, but remember, you really care about this. And they go, oh yeah, no, I really do care about that, which could be the guiding star. So I guess it's, I would like to say, like, in your process, like, to be able to have the ability to decide, like, at some point, okay, no, vision, that's not good, let's go with something slightly different because that's not going to work in this context, right, as well.
Yeah,
I like calling it a flag to march behind. It's a bit militaristic, but it's a way of stopping people getting the wording too long, because you just say, no, won't fit on the flag. So it's a good metaphor to use, but it's the same sort of thing as a guiding star. We're going over there rather than here are the words that describe exactly the route we're going to take or what the destination is like when we get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Anyone else on the call? Maybe someone we haven't heard from? It could be a question, a reflection. Jonas? Oh, I can't hear you for some reason. But you're in the call twice, so it might be that you have to unmute the other connection. Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So one thing which I thought was quite telling for me was this slide where you you basically suggested that it's important to tell people why you invite them to a particular meeting, or at least that you explain them the process that will unfold to some extent. Sort of providing, you said, I think, providing the parameters under which this group of stakeholders are going to collaborate. And that really sort of struck a chord, because what I was sort of trying to put this and incorporate it into the context in which we are working, whereby we are really seeking to have as many stakeholders as possible beyond civil society organizations. And as you do so, you also realize that you would still, like, in your views, would you still need to at least allude to some of the end objective for which people have came? You know what I mean? Like the tension between not necessarily having a common objective or disagreement over what the objective, what the end objective could be, and the framework for collaboration.
Yeah,
this is something I feel is probably very helpful to provide some sort of framework. But how far should you go in saying, actually, we've invited you, but we don't really know what the end goal should be? And even if we do so, there are very strong disagreement within the room about what the actual end objective should be. So at least that generated some reflections and internal reflections on my side.
Great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it prompts me to think about inviting people to say, we understand that you care about this, and so we're inviting you into a conversation about this. That's parameters which have you care about the sustainability or the, you know, protecting the Amazon forest and the diversity of species in the Amazon. And we want to invite into a conversation about this without it having to be specific, you know?
Yeah.
And that still sets parameters, but it doesn't necessarily predefine outcomes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, thanks.
Yeah. But it's a fine line of language as well, and like I think it's an invitation to co-create rather than an invitation to buy into something. Is the difference. I would love to hear from everyone. If you have a particular learning that you're taking away, could you type it into the chat box so that we could capture that? That would be really helpful because we're at time. And thank you very much for joining. the first workshop of 2020. And we will be running the next 3 over the next months, and Matthias will coordinate and let you know what the dates are for that. And Matthias, will you leave the line open, so if anybody's typing in the chat, you can capture it?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Wishing you wonderful days, evenings, wherever you are in the world. And multi-stakeholder collaboration. Boom.
Thank you. It was very insightful. Thank you very much, Milva and Matthias.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
everyone.
Nice to see you all.
Bye.
Very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.